Hi, and welcome to my presentation on gamification and e-learning. Today I'll be describing what gamification is, what the actual game mechanics are, or what actually makes a game a game. We'll be talking about the principles of game design and how they complement or map onto the best practices in instructional design, and also talking a bit about what research says about the benefits of gamifying learning and some of the reasons why instructional designers might hesitate to gamify. And lastly, I'll wrap up by talking about what I've learned this week and the perspective it's given me on my learning problem. Gamification can be defined as introducing game elements into non-game situations, and there are applications for gamification in business to promote desired behaviors among consumers, in workplace training to help employees learn and master acquired knowledge and skills, and in education to help engage and motivate students. When talking about gamification, especially in the context of e-learning, it's tempting to look at this only in terms of using technology to produce digital or video games to enhance learning. But gamification is really more about the use of game mechanics rather than the use of technology. And use of gamification can look very different depending on the context in which it's used, the technologies that are used, and the desired learning outcomes. But essentially, the use of games or game elements can provide immersive experience for learning, as well as rules, rewards, and feedback mechanisms that are aligned to learning objectives. So what actually makes something game-like? What is it that makes a game a game? If you think about some games you've enjoyed playing, and take a minute to think about what actually makes them game-like, you could probably come up with a list similar to this. Some of the game mechanics are challenges, chance, competition, cooperation, feedback, resource acquisition, rewards, transactions, turns, and winning or losing states. And if you think about, some games that you've played, I'm sure you can think of a lot of examples of how these sorts of mechanics come up in different games. Gamification of learning involves injecting some of these mechanics into the actual learning experience. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about why gamification actually works really well for instructional design. Through this week's readings, we learned that good games involve solving some sort of problem. They also contain rules of engagement that govern how players will play the game. There are specific outcomes or objectives to be reached through playing the game. There's some sort of feedback on performance. There's an aspect of interactivity or activity taking place, and a compelling storyline that drives the game. Now, when it comes to instructional design, we see a lot of emphasis on these same characteristics. So for instance, problem-based learning is regarded as an effective way for learners to master knowledge and skills in a tangible way with a real-life application. Thoughtful learning objectives are the foundation to any lesson, and we need to think about what outcomes will demonstrate that the desired learning has taken place. And feedback and interactivity are also very important to support and engage learners. So it's pretty clear that educational games or gamifying instruction could help learning take place. One specific instructional design theory that really fits in with the use of instructional games is constructivism. Constructivism is about letting the learners construct meaning through active engagement, as opposed to simply feeding learners information. What this usually looks like is encouraging learners to use active techniques, so experiments, real-world problem solving, maybe even a game, to create more knowledge and then reflect on and discuss what they're doing and how their understanding is changing. So games are really well poised to help create environments that simulate real-world contexts, which allows learners to construct their understanding and build skills. It seems like a real no-brainer to be using gamification to enhance learning. The research provided this week showed many benefits of using games or game thinking in instructional design. We learned about how gamification can increase student engagement and participation even when the gaming elements are optional or not tied to course grades. It was discussed how games can in some ways simulate real-world problems and scenarios to create more authentic learning experiences, and the possibility of educational games to promote systems thinking and collaboration, skills that are highly valuable in the modern world, yet not necessarily focused on in traditional educational settings. This week's readings also raised some of the potential barriers to gamification, including budgetary restrictions, not having access to or the skills to use the right technologies, and the fact that it can be time-consuming and difficult to construct and develop games that align with curricular objectives. But in my opinion, the positives of gamification outweigh the negatives, and I think that there are certainly ways to use gamification without getting bogged down in these challenges. And one way that I see is the use of casual games. I think that a lot of the challenges with implementing gamification relate more to the use of sophisticated strategic games that are fully developed to address the learning objectives. This might require more expensive and difficult to use technology, or a greater investment of time to plan, develop, and implement the game. Serious games, or those that focus on training a specific skill or educating someone on a concept, tend to take this form. On the other hand, the research this week showed that casual games, or games that are meant more for entertainment, can also be effective by motivating learners to engage with learning content and seek out optional learning opportunities more often. Casual games have a lower barrier to entry in that they can be enjoyed in short increments, have simple controls, and are easy to master. Researchers suggest that incorporating casual games may boost learning outcomes by increasing alertness, concentration, or getting learners into a state of flow. Even if the games are not deeply related to the content or learning objectives, they can still enhance learning in this way. That brings us to the end of this presentation. Thanks for listening, and I hope this has sparked some thought about how you could use gamification in your e-learning endeavors.